My name is Jonah Halper. Welcome to the Pipeline Live. For you to be here, this is a new thing. This is brand new. If you are dialing in or you're watching this, this is our first go at it. So you get to see it, in its infancy. And maybe when we get to episode 50 or 100, we'll look back on this episode and go, wow, well, that was the amateur hour. But for now, we're going to launch this thing, and I'm really excited that you're all here today. We have a wonderful guest who I will be introducing shortly. The first topic that we're going to be talking about today is around relationship-driven fundraising. I thought if we're going to talk about something, first episode, right, what would that first episode be? And I thought it should be really something that's truly fundamental, something that isn't too niche, isn't too specific, and something I know a lot about. I wrote a book on relationship-driven fundraising called Date Your Donors. I think I got a copy right back here. You can see that there, Date Your Donors. And it's something that I am very, very opinionated about and passionate about. And when I've done a lot of public speaking, it's predominantly been around that theme. I actually, when I launch any talk, one of the first questions I ask the audience, and I frame it in saying that my name is Jonah Halper. I'm a nice guy. I'm great with children. I'm someone you can bring home to your mother. I make a good living. I'm other focused. And then I'll find someone in the audience and I'll say, will you marry me? Right. And of course, everyone laughs. The person who I ask, turns a deep shade of red, and they say no. And then I say, okay, let me sweeten the deal. Let's say I give you a list of references, professional references, character references, someone you can call to verify that I'm actually a nice guy, someone you can call to verify that I'm great with children, someone you can call to verify that I make a good living, as much data as you need to know that all the things that I've claimed to be, I actually am. And invariably, the audience or whoever I'm, asked the question to, will they marry me? They'll still say no. And the reason they give is, I don't know you, right? And that is the real underpinnings of a lot of what we do as fundraisers. You can have all the data in the world. You can have a wonderful mission. You can do great work. You can leverage the dollar better than the next guy. But if you don't have a relationship with that donor, you can't expect to raise more money. And those are the terms. The terms are, when I ask the audience, is your goal to raise more money than you did last year? If they say yes, which I've never met a fundraiser who says they want to raise less money than they did last year. But if they say they want to raise more money than they did last year, then I say to them, the only way to guarantee that is if you invest in your donors' relationships and the relationships with your donors. It's the only way to either take your existing donors and raise more money from them, or to go and engage and attract new donors. It has to be about the relationship. So I'm going to kick off the top of the hour here with a live poll question. This is for you in the audience. You'll see underneath, the way it works with this system, you'll see underneath your live stream video, you'll see two boxes. One is a question and answer, like question box, if you have a question for me or Jason when we get into the program. And then there's a live poll box. So in the live poll box, you'll see it's already populated a question for you. Does your organization support your efforts to invest in donor relationships? In other words, is the place that you're working at supportive of the work that you're doing on investing in donor relationships? What that looks like may vary between organization, but do you feel like that's a priority at your organization? Yes or no? So if you could please respond to that live poll question, and I will check the live poll in just a brief moment. But in the meantime, I want to thank our sponsor for the program today, which is Raise It. Raise It is a fantastic platform that I have personal experience with. We're going to watch a brief video from Raise It at this time.
Hey fundraisers! Mailings? That can be frustrating, time-consuming, and costly. Just trash it. It's difficult parting with the past, but it's time to move on. I know it's tempting to spend weeks entering all that data into your system. It's enticing, thinking of all the mail merge crashes and returned envelopes. But we've got another way. A better way. Say yes to innovation. Say yes to cutting-edge technology. Say yes to Raise It. We're all about simplifying the process while accelerating the results. We make it easy for your donors, so the response is super quick. Here's how it's done. Your donors select an amount, enter their info, and receive a confirmation email, all within seconds. Compare that to the days and weeks that this exact transaction would take with a print campaign, and you need no more convincing. But there's more. Running multiple campaigns? No problem. We got you covered. At Raise It, the options are endless. It's no one-size-fits-all. Our expert campaign managers are here to help you decide what campaign model will work best for your cause. Here's a sneak peek of two of our platforms. Play Raise, a unique raffle of thrill where the ticket price is based on the spin of a wheel. Raise-a-thon, time-based and matching campaigns displaying the multiplied impact, all while incorporating a peer-to-peer element with multiple raisers and team pages. To top it off, we charge no transaction fees or percentages. Just integrate directly with your existing credit card processor. Got questions? We're here for you. Visit our website at raise.it or give us a call 732-917-8900.
All right, welcome back. I personally have used Raise It. They are a wonderful team. We did a charity gala virtual one because of Corona, and a lot of us have had to move our physical events online. So this platform really worked wonderfully for my client based in Chicago. So I can tell you firsthand that they're a really wonderful company. The customer service is fantastic, and they're not commission based. No matter how much you raise, it's a flat fee. So I find it to be tremendous value for all my clients, and I highly recommend you reach out to them for yours. At this time, if you want to learn more about Raise It, we're going to launch the next live poll question. Press 1 if you'd like more information about Raise It, or 2 if you do not, or you just don't have to respond to the live poll at all. But I want to make that available to everybody because Raise It is truly a wonderful company. Okay, so now we're going to get into the meat and potatoes of the program. I'm going to now introduce Jason Zwang. Jason, are you there?
Hello, everyone. Hey, fundraisers. I loved your video. It was like the perfect way to start it. Hey, fundraisers.
Welcome, Jason. Excellent. Well, really happy to have you here. This is a real treat. Probably because our history goes back 15 years, right? We were babies.
Sandbox
We
days.
met
That's right.
in the sandbox, and yes, the proverbial early professional sandbox days. Let's see, how did it happen? I was working for the Jewish Federation in Western Connecticut. Your dad was my boss. He was the CEO of the Federation of Western Connecticut. And there was a hurricane. Which hurricane was it? Which one was a big hurricane?
Katrina. It was Hurricane Katrina. It was the first major hurricane to hit the United States in a long time, and we were still suffering from it, unfortunately.
Yeah, so that hurricane prompted a lot of organizations, Jewish communities, and many communities who basically organized to find ways to raise money to help the families affected by it. And we did that. We were part of that experience. We put together a tremendous rock show at a gorgeous community campus in Western Connecticut. Oh, look at that. This is Jason on guitar. And that is me with Jason's dad, me giving little rock star signs there. This was in 2005. Pretty wild, huh, Jason?
Yeah, I can't believe you even have that photo. But thank you. Yeah. Immediately, diminishing my professional atmosphere, my bifurcated life, what I am during the day and what I am at night are two different things. Yeah.
We do what we can. We try to bring you down a notch. You know how
Right.
the ego of the fundraiser can get up there a little bit. So we do what we can.
Sure. Thanks.
All right. Well, first of all, okay. So now everyone knows how we met at that time, and you were not yet in your role as a professional development in that career. Give me a little bit. Give the audience. I mean, I do know what you've done over the last 15 years, but give the audience an idea of what you've been doing for the last 15 years.
Yeah. So, it's funny because I always use this analogy. like, some people's fathers, were a shoemaker, and so you're a shoemaker, an accountant, and now you're an accountant. Well, my dad was a fundraiser, and regardless of his title, it's essentially what he was most responsible for. And I never really understood what that meant until I went to college, and really started better understanding organizational development and things, and taking an interest in that. And then I had just a great experience. Somebody took a chance on me. I knew I wanted to work in nonprofits. I knew I wanted to make impact. And my first supervisor, named Karen Lamalva, actually gave me a chance working with individuals. And so I came right out of the gate, sort of guns blazing there, working with individuals and, a special gifts program at University of Connecticut. And, so since then I have worked at an INGO, Habitat for Humanity International, so an international non-governmental organization. I've worked in other higher ed. I've worked at a social services community action agency. I've worked at an academic medical center, and also a tertiary care hospital. So, pretty varied background there. Yeah. All with
and now you're the director of development at Emory University in Atlanta. Is that correct?
That's right. So I specifically now work with our healthcare, patients and grateful patients, which is a sort of really unique style of fundraising, very different than some of the other styles that I've done before. But it's interesting because a lot of people assume, and it's like we follow these pipelines in fundraising where you start in one genre and you sort of stay in that as you grow, and I wasn't so keen on that idea when I started. And I'm really glad that I made that decision early on. And what I've learned now is that everything really is about the donors. And donors are donors, right? Behaviors don't change that much. Everyone is passionate about something for a reason. And so anyway, it's just been, what's that?
Did you find that transitioning, for example, from like a Habitat for Humanity to like being the director of development from Emory University, a stark difference, a big learning curve because of the fact that, the sectors that you were in, whether it's humanitarian or social service, into higher education, university, science, medical, was that a difficult transition? Was that something that took some time?
It only took, it didn't take that long because really I stayed focused the whole time on saying, I understand what we're working here with, with donors, and I need to find out the framework that goes around this. But I'll tell you one really interesting, very quick story. When I came on at Emory, somebody that was very high up in the sort of subject matter expert area in what I work in said to me, when we sat down for an interview, sort of an old school interview question, said to me, so what do you know about this topic? That meaning the subject that I'd be raising money for. And I said, to be honest with you, I don't know that that's the right question. I think the right question is, what do you know about relationship-driven fundraising? What do you know about working with donors? And that was really the start to what has been a wonderful time thus far at Emory for the last 2+ years. And been the theme the whole time is really just saying, let's focus on what our donors' needs are, and really listen to them, listen to what they have to say closely. And through that, we will expand their support and really their overall interest in being involved with the institution. And it's been just like that.
Wow, that's great. Okay, so we've got 3 topics to discuss today, and I'm going to pony up the first one, which is called Know Thy Donor. So I want to ask you, first of all, to the audience who's watching from home. Most definitely everyone's watching from home with the whole work environment now. But if at any point you have a question for either Jason or myself, or just want to leave it open-ended, there is a Q&A box beneath the live stream video. We will try to get to a few during the program, and we would love to hear from you. So the first topic, Know Thy Donor. Jason, so we hear a lot about donor-centered or relationship-based fundraising, right? It's a big topic. You go to any of these conferences like AFP, Association of Fundraising Professionals, right? Donor-centered philanthropy, right? So that seems obvious, right? So, but in your experience, why do we need to focus so much on the relationship and not just the needs of the organization? Like, if you have a great product, then that should do it. Like, why is it being donor-centric critical to the fundraising process?
That's a really good question. So, it's funny, when I started this career, everyone said to me the same thing. They all said, it's all about the relationship, right? There was like books with that written on the front of it. It's all about the relationship. And I never really understood why, truthfully, until later in my career. It's one of those things that you hear and, you only begin to understand it like after the time when you needed to really understand it. And so, it's kind of funny like that. And so anyway, I better understand now, why it's so important. And the truth is that in our higher dollar relationships, that it's everything that's involved with that has to do with how you dig in with your donors. And in the lower level, it's really spent on, it's a little less relationship focused, a little bit more transactional in that, we sort of are doing the same thing we did last year. We're looking for increases from last year. It's focused on that. And we're talking to them about their cash rather than their wealth. And that transition from cash to wealth is really critical in this conversation. If you're going to dig into your IRA, or dedicate a life insurance policy or assign that to a charity, you really have to know that charity and trust them. And so trust building is tremendously important here. So what I'll say is that relationships are incredibly important, but they're never the same twice, right? Every relationship is different. So I can't really tell you here in this sort of webinar or podcast that we're doing exactly how to build a relationship, because they're all different. But what I can tell you is why it's incredibly important to focus on that. And that's what I took away from this statement after 15 years. So here's what I'll say. Because of the fact that they're all different, you really have to get in and understand the puzzle pieces of how you're going to guide your relationship going forward. So when we get to know a donor, we learn about their preferences, we learn about the things that they care about and their processes and passions. And so what are the things they care about, right? Why do they care about them? And then a really important one, how do they care about those things? How do they choose to do that? What does it look like in their family? Understanding why they care about those things. Well, what's the story behind that? And as you dig into these things and ask these questions, our donors get to feel closer and closer to us. And it's interesting because we're not a friend, we're not family, but we get such close information because of that middle space. And so when we hear all that, now we have these puzzle pieces in front of us, right? All this information. So now we can decide what to do with it. When we advance the relationship past just introductions, now we have some of these puzzle pieces. We use them to craft how we're going to move forward. So, I'll give you an example of how this worked. I'm working with one particular donor right now, where I worked with them, not that long ago. They came on board very quickly with a high level gift. It was $1 million plus gift, and it was pretty fast. And we had an opportunity to get to know them on a different level. And I talked to them about their philanthropy, and the family said to me, we take this very seriously. They said, I get to, not I have to or I want to, but I get to wake up every morning and think about what my giving will do today. It's a privilege for them. And they took it so seriously that a few months later, just 3 months after this making this $1 million commitment, the pandemic hit. And I knew a lot of their interests, and they were particularly positioned to enjoy and be interested in some of the things that were going on with the pandemic. And we have a program like this at Emory that's able to make some serious impact. And so I said to them, you entrusted me with your deepest intentions, with what you'd really like to do with philanthropy, with regard to your family and the impact you want to make in the world. In that context, I feel it's my responsibility to put something in front of you if it fits the kind of impact you're trying to make. In earnest. And I understand that we just had a gift together, but there's incredible urgency here. Would you permit me to put this in front of you? And they said, of course, we expect you to do that. So we had actually transitioned the relationship because of knowing about how they work to them expecting me to put an agreement in front of them. And so that was sort of a new way of thinking about that relationship. And that's a great example, I think, of how relationships can really take an important role.
Right, and I have a similar type of lesson that I've learned from my career is that when you're new at an organization, if you're working with somebody who's coming into a role, It's really great to be able to call someone who is a donor, whether they are a current donor or someone who gave a year or two ago and they haven't given a little bit, to ask them what motivated them to give their last gift, right?
Hmm.
Like just ask them, like some of the things that you were saying were like heavy stuff, like, their priorities and their values and what makes them open up their wallet. Like these are big things. So that can sound very intimidating, but the truth is that when you ask them those questions, they will run with it, right? Like those are
Yeah.
great questions to ask. So when I have like someone who's coming into a new role and their job is to go after people who are either existing donors or past donors, the moment you ask somebody, I see that you gave to us last year, what was your motivation to give? They immediately are forced to recall, right? Like, what was the
Hmm.
okay, fine. You're asking me why I gave. So then now they're starting to go back in their head. What was it that moved me to give? And it will probably be something along the lines of like, oh, I was inspired by this, or I was at a dinner and saw that, or whatever it was that prompted them to give, which positions them now in a healthy place to have a bigger conversation about the work of your organization while doing it from the lens or the perspective of that donor, right? It's not about me. It's not about me
Hmm.
listing off all the virtues and the wonderful things about the organization. It's what prompted you to give, right? What inspired you to give, and that opens up that conversation into something much more, which I think is very exciting, and therefore I don't have to do most of the talking. Right? The moment I ask them why they give or why their parents gave or anything along those lines, I now get to listen and pay attention, and then I start culling all this great information that will become valuable, that will absolutely
Hmm.
serve me, similar way that it served you to be able to go back to a donor and say, I know you just gave, and I know you just gave in a big way, but I would be doing a disservice not to bring this other thing to you. Why? Because I pay attention. I was paying attention. I know what you said to me, and now here is that thing. And I know, recognizing that you just gave, I wanted to approach it. So that definitely is something that resonates with me. And I think if you are someone who is a development professional, to not be scared by those big questions, because anybody who gives is thinking in terms of their legacy, not necessarily generational legacy, but they want to see that their money's not thrown into a black hole. So anything that's going to help, propel that gift into something that grows and grows and grows mission wise, I think is something that's going to resonate really well.
Sure.
Um, uh,
Sure.
so I'm going to take a question here because I see we've got a question. This is an interesting one, and I think it will play into the conversation we're having right now. So Dove is asking from New Jersey is asking the benefits of using a coach versus an in-house development officer. What's the priority? Obviously, different scenarios call for different recommendations. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach. But what's some of your thoughts on this? I mean, obviously, I have my own opinions, but I'd love to
Yeah.
get your take on in-house versus a coach. On the
Yeah.
outside, and
Yeah.
thinking from a donor-centric, the donor relationship side. Like, how do you see those two options weigh in on the relationships and the cultivation and solicitation of donors?
Yeah, so I have a couple of thoughts on that. I think when you have people in house, they're in there for a reason. A lot of times, it's because they're successful fundraisers, but it's also because they're really good and they have a value and meaning to that particular mission. But what a coach sort of allows you to have is an objectification of your strategy, right? So one of the things that I hope to talk about today later, because I have all these sort of little things I want to arm people with throughout this podcast here is working with an outside source or working with somebody who knows more than you do, and using them as a sounding board for all of your strategy. So internal people are great for this, but if you're the only development person or only one of two or three who's been there for a while or maybe doesn't have a lot of that extra experience, being able to talk to somebody who has a wealth of experience in different situations, even if it's not more years of experience under their belt, but it's just varied situations where we've had 1,000 donor visits or things like that. We can always offer a different lens, and it's so funny because it's not a spectacular thing, but it's kind of dull. But the truth is it's that one little idea, it's that one little instance that you come up with in that creative session where you decide to go that route, and it makes all the difference in the world. truly listening is really something that takes multiple parties to think about. It's hard to absorb somebody one-on-one and truly understand what they're saying. And so I've always found it helpful. And so I think having a coach really allow you to objectively look at things.
Yeah, I agree with definitely agree with that. I think the other thing to consider is, you know, a donor wants to get approached by somebody who represents the mission, right? Now, the number one compliment a fundraiser gets is, "I see you believe in what you're doing," right? Like it comes out of every
Mhm.
fiber of your being. You're animated, you're excited about it, and then the donor, or prospective donor, gets excited about it. They want to be a part of it. So I don't think a coach can replace that function, right? So when you're talking about somebody that's dealing directly with donors, nothing will be better than having somebody who works for the organization full time, represents the organization, can say, "I am that organization."
Mm.
But I would definitely say, like as you said, a coach is valuable in its role of providing objective guidance, holding the organization to task, making sure the work is getting done, and being able to give their professional, like you said, from doing it for so long and working with a variety of organizations and knowing what works in a variety of settings, it's definitely an advantage. But of course, at the end of the day, you need to have someone who's the face of the organization, who's going to be playing a frontal role with the donor, and always best to work with, whether it's the founder or the board of directors or the staff. People who are eyeball deep in it, they're going to, of course, be the best representative directly with the donor. So that's definitely something
I've
that.
one last thought too on that. You sort of touched on it, but I just want to expand just one more second on it, and that is that a lot of times, sort of looking for that outside counsel allows you to get, you know, I know what it looks like to have a fully funded shop, right? And a lot
Yeah.
of younger charities or smaller charities may not have the opportunity to have a cause marketing department, right next door to them, or people that are specifically hired to write just these kinds of grants. But I've been around those people for a long time, and I know where we take individuals where they may move from this, and then expanding their relationship to their entire corporation, right, or their entire board, and really using that relationship to leverage for new pieces. So helping encourage their sphere. And a lot of that is afforded by the budgets that I've been able to work, within, or that coaches have been able to work within. And so you sort of get to expand, and get the experience of having a full budget, of having like a fully fleshed out operation, but for, just a taste of it, to be able to get exactly what you need for the output. And that's a pretty unique opportunity too. That can be in, what we're talking here is taking a gift from potentially $5,000 to $100,000. You really make that up pretty quick, and it takes that sort of little bit of acumen to get there.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, great. We've got more questions, but we're going to save it for the next part of the program because I want to launch into the next topic, and I think some of the questions work equally well there. We're going to go on to topic number 2 about building trust, right? Being able to
Uh,
move that relationship along, and building trust with the organization and getting to the point where they want to make a serious investment. So, of course, as I've said in the last topic, if anyone in the audience has a question, there is a question box right underneath the live stream. I do recommend you submit any questions or comments there. Yeah, I'll try to get to them as we go on. Just interesting fact: the original poll that we did asking people, I was before you came on, Jason. You might have been able to hear it in the wings, but the question we asked the audience at the beginning was if their organizations are supportive of their efforts in being doing things that are relationship driven fundraising. 67% said no, which I found to be very interesting. I mean, not surprisingly completely, because I think there's not a lot of necessarily stuff that's baked in to an organization, like procedural things that would foster relationship driven fundraising. I think that usually you find more of that housed with the individual, right? Like the Jason Zwang is the one who brings the relationship strategy, or Jonah Halper, not necessarily the organization having it baked in. But I do find it interesting that majority of people obviously, are tuning in. Hopefully, are getting something out of this when we talk about relationship-driven fundraising, because most people don't have that as something that is either discussed regularly in the organizational setting, or baked in any real way. So the topic that we're going to talk about now is building building trust. So I'm going to ask you a question, Jason, on this topic. Um, if we're talking about authentic relationships, I would imagine that relationships, it's a fluid experience, right? It's not something that's just like, an on and off switch, like not
Sure.
engaged, engaged, like non-donor, donor.
Yeah.
I
Yeah, that's right.
that sounds great, but it's just not reality. It's like like real relationships. So if that's the case, what do you think the progression looks like? Right. So we're talking about building trust and building relationships beyond what you would find in a textbook, right? So I'm not saying like opening up the manual, page 86 to 105. This is what it should look like. Just from your experience, what are some things that you think are some key benchmarks or key things that you found in your experience? It might not be the same for everybody, but in your experience that show that progression of that relationship throughout, going from someone who's new to you, new to the organization, and becoming a significant donor.
Yeah, that's another really good question. And you're right. Of course, it's not fluid. Or I'm sorry, it is fluid. It is not binary. And it is absolutely something that, you can find some steps in a textbook, but it's really becomes a gut thing over time. And there's certain things that you want to hear. And I want to talk a lot about some of those strategies right now. I think that this is a great place where I can sort of unload a couple of strategies for people. So the first thing I want to talk about is building trust is really the equivalent of what we call in our industry cultivation, right? And cultivation is one of the 5 pillars of donor-centered fundraising. Right? So we have qualification, cultivation, solicitation, stewardship, and so this is really where we put all that together and where we start to build that trust in the beginning of this. And so as we're cultivating people, if you take my previous example from the last answer where I said our relationship building was getting us the puzzle pieces, really what this does is take those puzzle pieces and start to put them into place, right? Think of like Candyland, it looks like the actual map. Now we take these pieces that we've learned and we put them into the map and we start to do this. So the way I like to do this and start to build trust is one thing that and I'll start with this because I think it's counter to the way that a lot of people choose to do it. A lot of people in organizations like to talk about why we're the winner, why we're the best, why we're so good at what we do. And that's really where you start the conversation by saying, this is it. And the thing is this is where you get, the $500, $1,000, maybe $5,000 gifts where people say, good job, shake hands. Sounds like you're doing a great job. You've really told me everything I needed to know. I'm going to go ahead and make a gift. And that's great on a certain level, but it won't really get you to where you need to be to have the deeper conversations. In order to do that, you have to start focusing on the problem. And so what I mean by that is, what is the problem in the world or in your community or in your sphere that your organization or you in particular as a development person are trying to solve? Talk about the scope of that problem, right? Who does it affect? Who does it impact? What do those people look like? What do their nights and days look like, right? Are there certain people around the world that are a complete subset, different from who you expect, that also are getting impacted by this? Are there things that have adverse reactions that we could be controlling, but we're not, and we haven't even thought of that yet? So the scope of this problem gets people to say, wow, I've had my little slice of this, but I didn't understand just how big this was until now. I didn't understand that it was something that there's an incredible need for, and then you shift from talking about the scope of the problem to why the organization is uniquely positioned to address that problem. So why us, right? Well, because we have this many partners, we know these particular people, our people at this organization have this kind of experience, so not yet saying why you're most successful. We're still not talking about the winner. We're talking about why are we the ones to capture this incredibly complex problem. And that is something where you start to get a lot of traction where people start saying, wow, now they start feeling like it's we, right? I'm now engaged in the problem as a potential donor. I have understood this is an issue. That's your scope. And then I'm in the right room. I'm with the right people. That's you being uniquely positioned. The next natural conversation is, so what have we tried so far? And this is where you say, look, here's what we've tried so far. Let me explain why it hasn't gotten to where we need it. And what you're sharing in this conversation is you're eliminating all the other avenues that essentially leave you with the need for unrestricted. because we do get federal or government grants in some cases, but those take so much time. A third of my time is spent on reporting requirements and all this other kind of stuff, and I just don't have time to do my work, or I need to know the answer before I can even do the experiment. That's a lot of complaints that I get now at Emory, and that makes it really challenging to get that kind of funding. Talking about why funding from a certain foundation can be tough. These are part of the reasons we haven't gotten there, but also the solutions we've come up with really have fallen short because we haven't had that flexibility or that partner that can move with us and be dynamic as we try new things from the uniquely positioned smart people that we have on board. And the last thing I like about that too is it gets all the questions that what you should do questions, gets those out of the way too. Nobody says to you at this point, oh, you should hire this person, or I know a guy that does this. Part of what we're talking about in this step 3 here is, why we already have these right people on board, but why they just don't have the fuel that they need. So after this question, it naturally begs a question session where we get donors talking about, why is it that I should, maybe I should participate in this, and what is it that you might need to move that needle, right? So this is now you're talking about, 3 phases that get a donor deeply engaged and cultivated to understanding their purpose and why they need to be there. So, that's one tip I'll give you, is to talk about the problem in the world, not the solution. The other thing I'll say is you always want to have a strategy for a sounding board. And I just mentioned this a little bit earlier. We were talking about why having a coach is important. So having somebody else to bounce these strategies off of is tremendously important, to hear yourself objectively. Doing things in a vacuum is never a great idea. Look at your portfolio every day as well. So you have a group of people that you have decided are likely prospects to improve their giving. Every day, take a look at those names. Just run through it, just on your phone or whatever it is, really quickly. And think about what's going on in your organization and match those things together, right? Take action, send some emails. Say, I was just thinking about you. I just want to let you know this happened, right? And by doing that, you're moving the needle. Not every step has to be a gift conversation, but every step should be relevant. So make sure that you're having relevant steps when you do that. Another piece of advice, I like to think of this as sort of an external camera. When I'm in visits with donors, I'm thinking about what's going on right in front of my face and deeply connecting with them in the moment. But I'm also having a little part of my brain think about strategy. Why are we talking about this? Why is this happening right now? And where are we going with this conversation? And always tying that back is incredibly important, which is why you want to have good strategy built out on the front end, so you don't get distracted while you're in the meeting onto something that could be shiny object. And that little piece in the back of your mind.
When you describe having a camera over here watching you, my version of that, because I resonate with that, but the analogy I've always used, or the way I've always done it, is like I know where on the wall I want to get to, right? Like, in other words, I know what I ultimately want to accomplish with this person, so that whatever the conversation is, and like I said, I can be present. And the way you can kind of bifurcate, as you were saying before, like the idea of saying, how do I be present, but also paying attention to where this conversation is going, is that you've in effect, you've already kind of set yourself a cultivation plan. Like, really where you want to go with this person. And that leads me to be able to focus on where I am now, but always making sure that it's heading really towards where I want it to go. I could be focused on them, but know what the ultimate goal of that meeting is. And one of the other things that you said before, which I think really resonated as well, is the idea that when you have somebody who you're unloading your problems of the organization and big, existential problems, and why the organization is unique to tackle it, and not like, we're the winner, but rather this is the challenge of the day and we're uniquely suited to fix it. I find that exercise to be valuable, not even on a big scale, but even on a like what's going on in your world right now, like what you're like this month, right? Like, what are we dealing with right now? What's the challenge? And I'll bring those type of things up especially when I think the person across the table from me might have some insight or value to bring to that challenge. Because I think ultimately what we're describing is, and first of all, doing that on that smaller scale creates a higher sense of urgency. It's more tangible because it's not some like esoteric big idea that you're trying to tackle, but rather like, we need to figure this out in the next 2 weeks, right? That creates something like, okay, well, let's come up with solutions. And in either case, whether it's a short-term issue or a bigger organizational issue or a challenge that they're trying to overcome, it's getting the donor to think in terms of we, right? Like you're getting them to say, what can we do? Like that's what you're looking for, that moment. And I know we've had conversations about this in the past, but like that's the thing that we're really looking for. And it's like that, almost like they've moved from the opposite side of the table and they've come to sit on your side of the table to tackle the same issue as you. And that's really when you've got them in a bigger way. It doesn't mean you've got them forever. It means that you're doing something correct in getting them to be a problem solver. And people support what they help to create, or what they help to work on. So if they are expending their energies on trying to come up with real solutions, whether it's an introduction to somebody, whether it's their technical expertise, if they're uniquely positioned in technology and finance, and they're a CTO of Morgan Stanley, and that their skills might be uniquely suited for your challenge at your organization, that's absolutely something you should bring up with them, because they'll immediately pull down the board and start writing all, what their ideas and solutions to your problem. And it gives you permission to engage them further, because the moment they start making recommendations, now you can go back to them in a week's time and say, hey, I took your recommendations. This is what I've done with them. And this is the repercussions, or the positive repercussions, or the negative, whatever is going on. And you have that permission to continue the dialogue with them and engage with them further. That can't happen if you go in there, I, me, all about you, we're the winner, we're the best. Using a dating analogy, if a woman or a man sitting across from you is talking about themselves the entire time, right? Like we've all had those situations where the person across from you is all about themselves. There's no bigger turnoff, right? The conversation is basically dead in the water. You have no interest to engage with them further, and you're just trying to find a way to get out of that conversation. So that's incredibly important. Even for a fundraiser who's super excited about the mission and loves what they do, you kind of need to check yourself and say, okay, I may love what I have to offer. I may think I'm the greatest thing since sliced bread, but I need to frame the conversation in a way that it's not about me, but it's about the problem and how we can solve that problem together. I think that's really, really fantastic. And I think it's really, really great insight. I'm going to take a question here, if that's okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, let's see. Okay, here's a good one. This is a Corona-related one, I'm sure, and it ties into the whole cultivation and solicitation piece of it. Dan wants to know, how have you used Zoom, or I guess really, any software that is, remote conversations or video conversations, for solicitation of donors or acquisition of donors, making new friends? How do you see Zoom playing into that dynamic? Doesn't have to be for major gifts. He's saying not specifically for major, virtual events. I don't mean Zoom or doing something for virtual events per se, but just on a one-on-one basis to engage using something like a Zoom, or I don't think anyone uses Skype anymore. But something like a Zoom or Microsoft Teams or something that puts you like that. Do you have any thoughts on that?
I do. So I've found that today potential donors or donors are much more likely to take a meeting over Zoom. In fact, some prefer it even to a phone call. Which is good, and it's sort of I think sort of a recognition of an old school mentality of having face-to-face meetings, that once those started to go away during COVID, people missed the opportunity to connect more deeply. It's interesting. We thought we were just moving forward in this society like it was a linear path, and like we're never, what's going to happen to old school, handwritten letters and all this stuff. And we're starting to see people come back. And I think Zoom is an outgrowth of that. And so I've used Zoom in a number of different ways to have initial calls, and I use it. And I say to them, I'd like to have a Zoom because it allows me to share my screen so that I can really show you some unique things. And I couldn't do this before, right? I really couldn't do this over the phone. And it was tough in person for me to bring, this paper. It was distracting. But Zoom allows me to just pop something up on the screen, and I think makes us more productive. And people have appreciated that opportunity. I've also seen a former colleague of mine who's particularly apt at major gift fundraising. What she did is, so they engage with their mission very directly. And so they have lots of photos, lots of things to touch and see and feel. And so what she does is she takes her Zoom background and loads in that potential, that Zoom background screen where you have that little thing where you can load up all your photos. She actually loads up all the photos she needs there. And while she's talking, she takes them on a tour and changes her background so that she can say, so here we're doing this, and then we move to this phase, and this is what it looks like. And you'll see this and this in the photo, And I thought that was really, really cool, a really unique way to use it. So that's personally
That,
how I'm using it.
yeah. I would absolutely say the thing I love the most about these Zoom meetings. I don't like sitting in the same place pretty much all day, so I would love to be able to go to someone's office. That would be wonderful. But under the circumstances, the best thing is, without a question, the ability to showcase your mission. Right? You could be 6,000 miles away from somebody, and like you've described, the ability to share stuff and to do it. It almost feels like a working meeting, and you just get more done. It can be more powerful. I've seen instances where clients invited one of the constituencies who were served by the organization to participate on a Zoom call, like access to people, right? Like the idea of saying, okay, how can I take someone who is affected by our mission and bring them to someone's office? That that could be a challenge, right? That's a logistical problem. When you say, look, I have someone I'd love you to meet and get on a call and invite them to participate on the call, I think that's it's socially acceptable. It's something that's powerful. They get to meet somebody that's directly affected. And therefore, it's not just like you talking the entire time. It's you able to have someone there who is either the maven and expert in whatever the subject matter is, or someone who's affected by the
Mm-hmm.
mission. It's just you're able to put your mission first. And that's one of the
Sure.
wonderful things that I'm seeing with these Zoom things. So hopefully that answered the question of the of Dan who asked that. I think it's a very good question. It's just a matter of thinking
Yeah.
creatively about how you're going to showcase your mission from wherever you are. And I think there's a lot of opportunity there. Okay, let's go to the third and final topic. This is always a crowd pleaser whenever you ask this kind of question. When relationships go awry, when things don't go as planned. Um, we all, I've been to conferences where it's like a failure conference where you're focusing on what doesn't work. And I think there's a lot to get out of it. I really like that stuff because it showcases obviously what it's like in the real world with not everything being all swimmingly good. Like it's not the Facebook or social media where there's you could do no wrong. Like you see everyone's highlight reel, so you see like it's
But we
oh
never talk about it either. We never talk
right.
about it as fundraisers. It's like every time we go into a meeting, everybody's got their scarves and their tea and their, stuff, right? And everyone's perfect. And every move they made was perfect. And let me tell you something, being on two regional teams where I traveled around the country to raise money, there was a lot of things that were imperfect. I mean, it's unlimited. And all those mistakes. I keep going back to this question of like, why have a coach? I made all those mistakes for you, right? I already got them out of the way. I mean, like somebody else paid for it. Like we're good. And so I think there's something real there to talk about. And I'm happy to talk about my mistakes because it got me to where I am. And luckily, I'm one of the kind of guys that hopefully makes them once. I know people that make them more than once, and for me, I take it really deeply, and so I try to only make them once. But there's a lot. I mean, I couldn't imagine the amount of
Yeah, I mean,
mistakes that were made. So
all right, so let me frame it this way. Give me an idea
yeah,
of where you start a relationship, it's moving forward, and then it derails. Like, what does a derailing
yeah.
look like? Right? Because like if it never starts, okay, that's one thing, right? The connection's not there for a variety of reasons. It doesn't play out. I guess I'm more interested in knowing that if we're talking about moving a relationship along, right? You're talking about that, like we said, it's not linear, it's not binary. It's something that happens organically. So it doesn't always. Sometimes it withers or something goes off the rails. Tell me a little bit about your experience of it, something going off the rails, and A, how you recognized it was going off the rails, and then B, what you did to correct it, if it was able to be corrected. But give me an idea of something, or a story or two that you feel did that for you.
Yeah. I'm going to think of, there's one in particular that I'm thinking of that happened in the last few years. And I'm bringing this one up for a particular reason. And it's not, like a funny one, or it's not like an easy grab. This is one that, I should have known better. And so that's why I want to highlight it. It's a particularly deep one, right? And so what happened was I was working with a potential donor who's very excited about making a gift, and this potential donor was also a consultant, and so they were very knowledgeable about the subject. This is always a really tough gift to close because they know all the variables already. Part of our advantage as fundraisers is that they only, the donors only know what we tell them, right? But in this case, they already knew everything. So it was really hard. And the thing is like their gift was being asked to be made out of gratitude and from the heart and all these kinds of things. And I allowed the subject matter experts that I worked with who really, go and do the work to tell me what they needed directly rather than listening to the donor and just making the passionate, gift that they wanted to make. And we ended up getting very much into the weeds in a very complicated gift, achieving something that was, not agreed upon internally all the way across the board, that was not, approved, that was not simple. And it ended up then getting compounded by deeper issues later. But the bottom line is that I did not listen to the donor and making a gift from their heart. We thought about making the gift from the brain. And that's a mistake. That was a mistake. Ultimately, the gift came in too low. It was unfocused. There was not a good opportunity for stewardship attached to it, which is always what I'm thinking of when I'm asking for a gift is how can we steward this to, and is this a good one that's meaty that we can show them in a year? Like, wow, we've done so much with this. This one, really, we couldn't. And it basically created a lack of trust between me and these subject matter experts in the future because I trusted them and then the gift didn't come in. And so now I don't trust them as much, but they also don't trust me as much because that gift didn't come in, at least at the level that we wanted. So that was a big problem. And I needed to just listen to what the donor wanted to do and then simplify it and say, look, if you want to do this, let's set this up. We'll make it nice and easy. And there's so much we can do with it. Keep it high level. Don't keep it so small, so detailed that it ends up with this complicated program that you're held to with reporting requirements and really challenging stuff later on. That's not what giving is about. And philanthropy should never really take that seat. And so we ended up recovering because the money was never spent. It basically never happened. It got too political afterwards. The money never got spent. And so I went back to the donor. I said, can we shift it to something much more from the heart? And we did. And so now we're in a period where we shifted this gift and we're waiting now for the gift to get spent on something much more impactful that is a lot more from the heart, a lot more philanthropic, that is ultimately going to be very easy to steward and falls right in our pipeline of gifts that we close often for us. But it took 2 years to get it there. And it was such a small gift. It's the smallest gift I've closed since I've been at Emory. And it's really like just being a big pain. And so that's been a problem. And, I want to highlight a couple of things also not to do. And this is the most common one that I see among fundraisers, especially sort of young or new fundraisers, is placing data where it doesn't exist. So they'll listen to a donor and they'll think that they'll hear them say something, but they really didn't say that. I had somebody call me up once from an affiliate at Habitat and ask me, hey, I have this pledge from this donor, something that is sort of a multi-year gift that they've committed to. And, this donor basically came to me and made a payment towards this pledge that was larger than they agreed to, right? So they only needed to give $1,000 this year, but they gave us $1,400. Should I take that $1,000 and credit it to their open existing pledge and then take that $400 and open a new pledge and think that they're asking us to make a different kind of gift and talk to them about another gift? And I was like, what? I was like, when you have a credit card bill, right? And the minimum required payment is $100, but you pay $150, what happens? The whole $150 comes off the top. I was like, this isn't complicated. They were placing data in places, thinking the donor wanted to do something that never existed. And in the lack of data, here's what you want to do. You want to say to this donor, and you get better at this over time, this is what I'm hearing from you. I just want to verify that this is your expectation, right?
Yeah.
And that helps you build trust and build a relationship, a good working relationship. So don't ever be afraid to do that. Remember, you are a relationship builder, but you're also playing a little bit of a customer service role here. And you want to make sure you process things accordingly and do exactly what they expect. Seeking directives from donors is always a good idea. Please, can you give me a directive on something? I'm not quite sure how you want this to happen.
I don't think I've ever had an instance where I've asked to repeat back. I've repeated back what I thought I heard, and the donor would be annoyed or potentially annoyed
Yeah.
that I did. Like, that never happens. Right? They're thrilled that you're saying, "Let me just make sure I get this right." Right? Like, that's
Right.
always something that's appreciated, and it shows that you're being present. You want to make sure you get it right. They appreciate your professionalism. That's without a question. I would definitely say that most of the time, and I've heard it from your story, and I know from my personal experience, when I feel in a level of desperation, and generally I don't, but if there's a certain dynamic with a particular donor, like you said, where they're very analytical or they're very focused on the minutia, I'll go into a mode of, okay, what do I need to give them to secure this gift? And that the risk
Mm.
of that is what you had, where, okay, well, now you're promising to create terms and reporting and all this. That's not in the best interest of the organization, not in the best interest of the stakeholders of the organization. You're doing the best interest of trying to get that gift in with the minutia and all the terms that are being brought by this donor, and that feeling of desperation never pans out well, right? It never
Right.
plays to the strength of the ask. And what you described as the fix of going back to them and say, look, you know what, the money wasn't spent, but like, let's look at this again. And you said do it in a bigger from the heart approach. You're getting them out of the minutia. You're taking control of it. It's instead of letting them be at the driver's wheel and the one calling the shots. You're saying, I'm calling the shots now, right? Like, look at me. I'm the captain now, right? So that's really that's what's happening. You're basically saying, we know as an organization, I know as a professional, what's in the best interest of our organization. Let's talk about what's going to move you the most within those parameters, and we're going to make this something that in a year from now, when you want to see the impact, we're going to have something really fantastic to show you. That confidence and that approach that you did is definitely something that I feel from my experience, the difference between what didn't work or what failed along the way and what I found to be very, very successful. So that's
Totally.
something I just wanted to kind of reinforce the way I experience it. Um, Jason, I want to ask a question from one of our people at home.
Yeah.
Dalit wants to know, in your opinion, what is the most common fundraising mistakes when approaching donors? So, what do you think? When you're approaching donors, are the most
Good one.
common mistakes? It's
First of
pretty.
all, I want to say I see her question on the screen here. I just want to say I remember Delhi. She's the one from South Africa that's calling in, right? Or
Correct.
something.
Yeah, South
Yeah.
Africa.
So
Yeah,
thank
South
you. That's
Africa.
amazing. I just want to highlight here. We're talking from Atlanta to Israel to South Africa. I just want to make that clear because that's a really big deal. And the fact that relationships work the same all over the world. Okay. I want to highlight that. So that said, the most common fundraising mistake, first of all, hands down, is not being authentic. One of the most amazing things you can have happen on a donor call is laughter. If you can have laughter happen right on the outset of your call, you are creating a relationship already, right? That you can always call that person back. It's how you make them feel is so important, so much more important than what you say. And so I always try to include an opportunity to lighten the mood and right, because that's the conversation we're having. And everything about our organization is so serious. But I just want to say that laughter is incredibly important. So not being authentic is the biggest mistake. You really, truly have to be in touch with yourself and that authenticity in order to be really good at being a fundraiser.
Great. That's fantastic. Okay, so we're gonna before we close, because those are the topics I wanted to cover. I have one more question I want to ask you from Robert. My boss is giving me a hard time about hitting certain fundraising metrics. How do I
Mm,
manage expectations while striving to hit these goals? This is like a
okay.
classic. I've got a boss who has setting these very aggressive or very
Yeah. Yeah.
ambitious goals, and I don't want to be fired in 6 months or a year. Right. Oh God, help me with the stress. Jason, what do we do?
Yeah. So metrics are one of my favorite things because they do work, but they're also, they can be really challenging and very rigorous. So here's how to manage that situation, in my opinion. First of all, you want to have complete transparency, with your boss about your performance towards it. And what you really want to do is break down your metrics. So they're usually given to you in an annual sort of tranche, right? You want to break them down to per month, well, per quarter, and then per month, and then per week, and then even per day. And then you take your per day one and you bump it up to the next whole number. And then that's what you want to hit. It's going to give you that little extra edge towards getting over the top, right? You want to also use the math from the top, add 10%. And then when you break that down, it'll seem very reasonable. But at the end of the year, you're going to find that you've blown your goals out of the water, which is really the goal. I also want you to remember that metrics are a leading indicator to gifts, right? So metrics are not gifts, right? And they can be closely tied, but it has to be substantive moves. So you can't fluff your metrics. If you fluff your metrics, it won't work. The magic will not work with metrics. And so they're a great thing, but you have to do them in earnest.
Sorry, give me examples. What metrics, just so that people at home understand? What are some things
Yeah,
that you
sure.
think in terms of metrics? Yeah.
Yeah, so this is how many donor visits you have per year. This is how many outbound calls you have to make per year. This is how many visits within a certain portfolio you have to make. This is how many first-time visits you have to have versus how many stewardship visits you have to have. Really, it's the organization saying to you or saying to their fundraisers, these are the kinds of conversations we want to be having. We're in exploratory mode, so really they'll say we want you to have 60 or 70% of your visits have to be qualification, have to be new donors, or we really haven't spent time saying thank you to donors this year, so 60 or 70% of your visits have to be in stewardship, right? And so they're usually something that it's your activity monitored on a certain amount of time to make sure that you can get to this goal, and that's assumed to be leading indicators to moving the dollar needle.
Perfect. Okay, so setting expectations is important. I can tell you just from my experience as a consultant, we do project management approach to donor cultivation, and solicitation is key. If you want your boss to manage, if you want to manage expectations with your boss or whoever is providing that level of supervision or oversight, letting them see, like you said, there's metrics, the calls, the meetings, the introductions, all that stuff. They will not be as difficult on you on the dollars raised, because they will see the process in action. If they don't see the process in action, then they're going to focus on only the dollars raised. So it's really important. And obviously, the metrics is how you get to the dollar raised. You need to get to dollars raised, but the way to do it is to show those metrics, and you can, and with the technology now, software, pipeline materials that you can use to demonstrate that process along the way, and that your boss or whoever can see what's going on with those relationships, how many relationships, and where you are in those processes. I mean, that's definitely my thought on that. Okay, Jason, you're great. I loved it. Thank you very much. The audience loved it. This was the first Pipeline Live we've done, so you really set the bar pretty high. Anyone who comes after you is going to go, oh God, I got to compete with Jason. So I really appreciate that, because now you've made it that any guest that comes, they're only going to come up higher. They have to, because otherwise, they'll look silly.
Thank you, Jonah. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. I really appreciate it. We'll be in touch. We'll see you around the block. And thank you for coming. Thanks for joining us.
Pleasure. Take good care.
All right. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I hope you had a great time. If you have any questions or comments, you can visit us online at altracity.com/pipeline or /pipeline live. That's the link you're on right now to watch the live event. But I definitely hope you enjoyed the program. We will have a recording available in the near future. It will be available on YouTube, and then we will eventually launch the podcast audio version for everyone at home to listen to our guests. We'll give ourselves a couple sessions to get that set up before we launch the audio podcast. But thank you very much for joining us, and have a great morning, day, evening, wherever you are in the world. Stay safe, stay healthy, and we will see you next time. Thank you.